Hi everyone, I'm Allie, co-founder of PotomacBeads. I'm going to walk you step by step through making your own bridal earrings. Whether or not you are the bride or someone making something special, we're going to go over the technique to make these beautiful set of earrings. If you need any materials, check out the links below me in the description to shop with us online at PotomacBeads.com as well as PotomacBeads.eu. These bridal earrings are going to be a two-step process. We're going to build around a 14mm silver-backed crystal Rivoli, and then we're also going to build around an SS39 Chaton, which is about 8.3mm. For the Rivoli here, we're going to be bezeling with some Delica beads in the gilt-lined white opal. If you have a nice kind of cream or any beading on your dress, it goes really, really well for that vintagey look. If you are going white for your wedding, you may want to use the white AB or the white pearl AB. For the 15-0 seed bead, we are going to stick to the silver-lined crystal. No matter what your dress looks like, chances are you may have little beads in this same finish on them, and they really make it stand out. So I would suggest sticking to the silver-lined crystal. We're going to begin by working with the bottom Rivoli, and then we'll make a separate piece on the top that we will then join together with the Chaton. We also have some 2mm pearls here in the white satin that we'll be adding as a little bit of an extra around the outer edge. If you do not have any pearls and you don't want any pearls, you could also use a 2mm crystal around the outside edge to give it a little bit extra sparkle. To begin, we are putting 36 of the Delica beads on some .006 white wildfire thread with a size 12 beading needle. You're going to go to the end of the thread, leaving just about a 1-inch tail, and you're going to tie these 36 beads into a loop. Just tying a regular overhand knot like you're tying your shoe. You're going to do 2 knots, so a double knot. Making sure the seed beads aren't included in that, go ahead and tie that knot nice and close. The next thing we're going to be doing is a circular peyote stitch. Peyote stitch is based on grabbing every other bead and adding a bead in it. If you need any help, we can also put links below for regular peyote stitch. You're going to sew through the first bead right after the knot, kind of moving the knot out of the way, and then get ready for that peyote stitch. For the peyote stitch, you're going to add 1 more Delica bead. Then you're sewing through, skipping over the next bead in line. So if we just sewed through bead 1, we're skipping bead 2, and we're going to sew into bead number 3. Always on the even number beads. So bead number 2 has 2 beads that are going to sit next to it like a brick wall. Bead number 3 we're coming out of, we skip bead number 4, which is going to put another bead next to it, and sew through bead number 5. You're going to go the whole way around the exterior of the design, adding in this extra row of seed beads. This is going to allow you to add 18 extra seed beads when we started out with 36, because we are adding basically half the amount. Go ahead and go around your loop, adding in an extra group of seed beads to get to that 18 count. As you add in your last bead, you're going to sew through that first bead that your thread was coming out of, so bead number 1. And then you're also going to do what's called stepping up. You're sewing through bead number 1 from this row of 18 that we just added. So you're adding 1 bead on your needle, sewing through bead number 1 as we go through bead number 36, and then also sew through bead number 1 from this first row that we just did. That's going to actually be 3 rows of peyote. The first one we did with 2, and then we just did our 3rd row. That is all we're going to do in the Delica beads, and then we're going to switch to the 15-0 seed beads. Remember, I have this silver-lined crystal, and these are size 15 seed beads. The Delicas are size 11. 11 of them approximately fit in an inch. The 15s approximately 15 fit in an inch. You're going to now add a row of 15s around the piece. It becomes much easier now to do the peyote stitch because you know and you can tell exactly where those 18 beads are that you just added. You're going to add a 15, sew through the next Delica bead sticking up, add a 15, sew through the next Delica bead sticking up. So we're now adding 18 of our 15-0s that are going to be sewed between the 18 Delicas that we just added in that 3rd row of our peyote stitch. Go ahead around adding in your 18, and then we'll do 1 more step up and we'll add 1 more row of our 15-0s. As we go around in the circle, we're adding our last 15-0, doing that same step up, going through the first Delica bead of our last row as well as the first 15-0 of the row that we're completing. Once you have that in place, give a nice little tug because the 15-0s are smaller than the Delicas. They will start to pull in, which is how we're going to hold the piece in place. Go ahead and add one more row of our 15-0 seed beads to the top here, and as you do, please go ahead and make sure that you are pulling the thread a little bit tightly to again pull those beads in so they sit almost like a tire and rounded, so they will hold in the back side of the Rivoli. As you go in and add in your last of your 15-0s to this back second row of the peyote stitch, rather than stepping up through the first bead that we just added in, we're going to go to the other side of this little wheel that we've created. Go ahead and stitch back through that first Delica that sits right next to that 15-0, also through the middle Delica that sits right after, and then finally into the third Delica that's going to sit towards that inner row that we haven't done any beading yet on. This is going to take you up through that diagonal and hide any additional thread that you may have. So we now have one side of our Rivoli semi-finished, and we'll do still one more little step in the back, but right now what we're going to do is pop our Rivoli in place. So we're going to kind of push the Rivoli down onto the piece, getting it to sit right on that back edge. And we're going to switch over to the front now. On the front, I want you to do the exact same thing, doing 2 rows of our 15-0 Delica or seed beads as well. So you're going to do the 15-0, go through the Delicas that sit on this side here, sewing on one 15-0, and we're going to do 2 rows of our peyote stitch on this side. So we did 2 in the back, and then we came to the front, and now we're going to do 2 in the front as well with these 15-0s, adding one group of 8 of the 15-0s, 18, and then a second group of 18 after stepping back up through the first bead from the first row of the 18. Continue around the piece. You can let your Rivoli go if you want to, but make sure as you start your second row that you have it held in there because we are going to make it stay inside of our bezel. As you finish up your Rivoli and you're doing that second row, I did step up like I'm going to do a third row. What we're going to do is our third row to get our nice little trim around the outer edge. And you don't need to do this, but I like the way that it looks and gives a little kind of dainty look to it. You can keep as you are here and then skip to the outer edge for the pearls as I show, or you can go along with me one more row. This outer row here, instead of adding 18 beads, we're going to add 9. We're going to add one of our 15-0, sew down through the next bead like you would in the peyote stitch. And then instead of adding one more 15, you're going to sew down through the first row of your 15-0 row, up through then the second row and out. What this is going to do is put a 15-0 into every other bead of that peyote stitch from row 2. So adding a bead, sewing through the next bead in line, and then instead of adding a bead, you're going to sew down through the first row of the peyote stitch and then up to the second one and add another 15. So it's going to allow you to add in 9 of those 15, and it gives you a tiny bit of a little trim, almost a crown-like point, which I think fits really, really nicely opposed to the pearls as we add them along the outer edge. When you finish up the last of that kind of little picot or the little crown, we're going to take our thread and needle and we are going to go to this side of the project, and then we'll do the same crown on the back, so that way the front and the back, when you're looking at them, match exactly. To get to the side, we're going to sew down through the Delicas till we're coming out through that outer row, or the middle row. So we're going to sew down along the project here, going back through those 15-0s. And as I did add the last row of picot trim, I kind of press it down to make sure those seed beads sit against the project, and that allows me to hold on to it a little bit better. So I'm sewing through that first row. So we have those building blocks basically where the 2 Delicas are right beside one another. I'm going through and coming out through the middle Delica, which sits alone by itself. When I come out that middle Delica, I'm going to pick up a 15 and then one of my 2mm pearls and then a 15-0 seed bead. Let that fall down next to the Rivoli project. Skip over the next single middle bead and go to the third one in line, sewing through and pulling that pearl down into place with the 15s on either side. That's just going to decorate it a little bit on the side. We're going to repeat this 9 times, adding in our 15, pearl 15. Again, skip over that middle bead next in line and sew through the 3rd middle bead. And that adds in the next little portion of the pearls. If you want to and you want it to look a little bit more fancy, again, you can use crystals. You can add in every single bead and have it a little bit more full. I'm going with the less is more. I'm going to go ahead and continue around and add in my pearls, and then we'll go to the back and actually cinch in the back a little bit with one more row of that every other peyote to create that picot trim. As we get ready and add in our last of our pearls, your needle is going to be going through that first Delica that your thread was originally coming out of, and it has just that beautiful, almost snowflake appearance to it. Coming through them, we're going to again go towards the back, so we are going to sew down through the next bead on the diagonal that sits in the peyote stitch, going through the Delica that sits towards the back. Then go through the 2 15-0s that sit right next to one another along the side. Coming out there, we're going to repeat that little picot trim, or that little kind of crown trim, where we add 1 15-0, sew through the next bead in the peyote stitch, and then instead of adding one more bead in that peyote stitch, sew down a row into the base row and then up into the second row. Again, adding in 9 of our 15-0s. As you do this one more time, just kind of push in towards the center and push your seed beads down so that little picot trim really hugs the back. Once you're done that, all we're going to do is get our beads towards the starting thread and tie the 2 ends together. Once you get your 2 thread ends next to one another, as you do that little trim along the back, you're going to sew in a diagonal along the peyote stitch until those 2 thread ends meet, and literally just tie them in a knot together. Same like we did the knot at the start of those 36 beads. You're tying the 2 thread ends together. We're going to take our thread zap, or you can do scissors, go in there and burn down the ends of our thread. Go ahead then and burn those flush against the project, making sure that you're not burning any threads that are on. Also, since it is wedding jewelry, you may want to burn off and kind of start your thread zap if you use it often to make sure there's no gunk on it, because you don't want any black burn marks with any thread residue from a previous product. Now we have our 14mm Rivoli finished. If you do want to and you want a smaller earring, you could stop here. Check out some of the other videos with the 14mm Rivoli and make a stud as well. With the extra thread that I have, and we're going to use about 5 feet total, I'm going to start with my SS39's Chaton. For that, I'm going to start with a little square. So we're going to go in and we're going to add 4 of our Delicas, followed by 1 15-0 in groups of 4. So we're doing 4 groups of 4 with the Delicas, with a 15-0 in between. This is going to be our initial starting area to hold that Chaton in place. After you have your 4 groups of Delicas on, make sure that you're ending with a 15-0 because you want it to be around in a circle. Go ahead and take it to the base of that thread, again leaving just enough to tie a knot, and tie these beads into a circle. Once you have that circle tied, without any beads being in that circle, go ahead and sew through the first 4 Delicas. So you're going to sew through the first 4 Delicas. Once you're through those first 4 Delicas, we're going to add some of our 15s to make our little netting to hold it in place. I want you to pick up and add in here 9 of your 15s. So you're going to add in 9 of the 15-0s in that silver lined crystal. And once you have the 9 on, which we're going to repeat this 4 times, you're going to sew back through those 4. So you're going to, if the thread's coming out the top, you're going to go back through those 4 so that these 9 seed beads get pushed towards the outer edge. Once you're through those, we are not going to sew through the corner 15-0s. So you're going to skip over that silver bead, they'll come in handy later, and you're going to sew into the next 4 Delicas. Repeat this now 4 times pulling the thread in nice and tight and kind of pushing that crystal bead that's around the corner out to the edge a little bit. Go ahead and repeat 4 times total, adding in 9 seed beads in each, then sewing back through the Delicas and on to the next set. Once you're through making those 4 little leaves almost, you're going to, after going through and adding the last 9, sew up through 5 beads that you just put on. So you're coming out through the 5th bead. You're going to add a 15, then one of your Delicas, then a 15, and we're going to do this 4 times, sewing over to bead number 5 that sits in that bead grouping of 9. We did an uneven amount so that way we would have that nice little point. Again, 15, Delica 15. Kind of spin around the project in your hand, count up 5 beads. Grab that 5th bead in line in that grouping of 9 and sew through. After you have 2 or so on, drop in your Chaton and start pulling tight to create that netting bezel. So in this project, you're learning both how to do the peyote bezel as well as this netted bezel. Go ahead and over in the line, 1, 2, 3, 4, sew through 5, which often the 5th bead will kind of stick up on its own. Again, 1 more grouping. And you can see that this bezeling was super quick and easy. Give a nice tight pull, and that Chaton will sit right in place there, exactly in the middle of the design. Once you have that in there then and it's all nestled in, we're going to go ahead and add some pearls to the outer edge, which is also going to be the way that we're going to attach it to our bottom portion. Once you're through with the center, I would recommend going ahead and taking your thread and needle back through all those center beads as well. We're going to come down through 4 seed beads that sit after one of those middle beads that we caught on. And we're going to add some pearls to the top portion here. Once you're through those 4 beads, go ahead and sew through the 4 Delicas that sit right below it, as well as this time I want you to come out through one of those corner silver lined crystal beads. When you come out through the corner silver lined crystal, add a 15, one of your pearls, and a 15 seed bead. Sew over to the next corner silver lined crystal bead. Kind of push those right in that space right there and move on, repeating 4 times, adding in the silver, pearl, silver, onto the next corner crystal, kind of pulling that out. 4 times this gets repeated to add that nice pearl edging, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to attach both the top, which is going to be the wire guard, as well as to the bottom portion. So the first section that we're going to do is adding the top piece. You're sewing through a corner one of your silver lined crystals. I want you to go back through that first 15 pearl 15 collection. Give a nice little tight yank, and then you're going to add in 2 of your 15 O's, 1 more of your pearls, and then you're going to pick up a wire guard or a wire protector. If you do not have those, you want to use a soldered ring or a closed ring. You're going to sew up through the wire guard, and I did pinch the wire guard so the ends sit closer together. You're going to sew through one of those little legs of the wire guard, around the horseshoe so that the thread sits in that channel, and down through the little tube on the other side. Pull that down nice and tight next to the pearl. Sew back through that same pearl that you just came out of, and just the pearl, and then repeat the 2 15 seed beads. Go to the opposite side of this 15 pearl 15 that sit below. So we started on one side, and we're going to sew back through that same 15 pearl 15. That's going to pull that wire guard and the pearl right in the middle of the design to sit nicely at the top. Also a great design for the bridesmaids if you would want to make them similar earrings that are just a tiny bit smaller. From here, we're going to go down along the design, going through the next 15 the that sits along the corner that naturally your thread's going onto. Through the next side, 15, purl 15. And we're getting to the base of this piece. Through the next 15. And again through the 15, purl 15. That sits along, oops, sorry, just the 15 and the purl. You want your threaded needle then right out through the purl that sits below that wire guard in the top. When we're here at the top, we're going to sew into the purl on the outer edge of our original piece, adding in 2 15-ohs, going down here to one of my pieces and sewing through a purl. While you're through the purl, you might as well sew through one of the 15-ohs as well. This is going to sit right below that piece there. And what we're actually going to do is make sure that it's going the correct way. So I'm going to sew out through that piece. And we're going to sew into the other side. We don't want it to sit backwards. So you want to make sure when you're sewing into the purl that the beads you're coming out of are sewing into a purl that is going to sit so that your crystal's sitting up. So I'm going to go down this way here. And that way we make sure that that purl is sitting right on top of the baseline. We're going to go and work our way back through the peyote stitch, back through the Delicas here, so we can come out the purl on the other side and link the two together. I'm sewing back through the Delicas, both rows 2 and 1. And again, the key whenever you're sewing through that peyote stitch is to make sure that you are sewing through the Delicas and following the line of the Delicas, because then you won't have any additional thread appear or show. I'm going to move that stop bead kind of out of the way here. So right over then up through the 15, from the other side. Keep working our way over. You want to come out through the exterior of that 15 purl. And once your thread and needle then are through to that exterior of that piece, we are going to work our way back to that center piece. So again, just sewing along the line. I know that looked a little complicated, but we're just sewing right along the line, getting that stop thread out of there. And then we want our thread and needle to be coming out of the purl, going through the 15. That's going to sit right next to that piece. So you can see I'm on the back here. And I'll show you flipping over to the front where your thread is supposed to come out. So it's supposed to come out right through that purl there at the top. So that way when we sit and add 2 15s, it sits nice and symmetrical. I'm going to keep it to the back so I can show easily that we're sewing through the purl then that sits in the top of the design. Bring your thread and needle out, and that is your connection point. If you're worried about this, you can reinforce it another time, going back through those 15-ohs and pulling it along here. What I'm going to do actually, because I know my thread is nice and strong, I'm going to go back up into my project, give a nice tight pull, flip over your project, make sure that your crystal is sitting properly there, and then all I'm going to do is reverse my thread along the piece till I get this thread back to the starter end, and I'm just going to tie the 2 thread ends together. Once I have those 2 thread ends together, I'm going to burn off the end of the thread and have my ear wires attached. I would recommend, if you are using ear wires, to either use posts or lever back earrings, because most brides are going to be dancing and having fun at the wedding, and you want to make sure that they are not going to lose their ear wires. If they prefer bridal wise, I would ask for sure. I'm going to be using some sterling silver ear wires. If your bride prefers fish hooks, make sure to use a little rubber backing so that way they do not lose their earrings. Nothing would be quite as sad as a bride losing 1 earring during the wedding and only having 1 for the rest of the pictures. If you do want to go bigger and bolder for the pictures. You can also check out adding the idea of an 18mm crystal to the bottom, and we have a number of different videos to do so. So I'm just going to add a lever back to those, and those are finished up then for these beautiful bridal earrings. Even though my bridal days were about 13 years ago, I wanted to show exactly how these look and sparkle with an updo and for these bridal earrings. If you do need any of the materials, remember below the video, you can see any of the links that you need to purchase from us at PotomacBeads.com as well as PotomacBeads.eu. Happy wedding day, happy blissful day. Any changes, suggestions, or ideas that you want to make sure to comment below, give a little thumbs up to the video. And if you do want to make more accessories and more jewelry, you can check out the rest of our YouTube videos as well as subscribe to this video. Thanks so much for watching, and congratulations, and have a wonderful wedding day.